Say, "It's already working," once every morning. Neville Goddard. Neville Goddard taught that the very first sentence you speak on waking becomes the seed of the state you will walk in all day. And this is never truer than in the quiet, unwatched rooms of your own private life, where no one else can hear you decide who you are. The premise for today comes from the Gospel of Mark, chapter 4, verses 26 through 28, and it reads like this: "So is the kingdom of God, as if a man should cast seed into the ground, and should sleep, and rise night and day, and the seed should spring and grow up, he knoweth not how. For the earth bringeth forth fruit of herself, first the blade, then the ear, after that the full corn in the ear." And Neville Goddard would stop you right there and say, "Do you see it? The man does not stand over the seed pulling at it with his hands. He does not dig it up every hour to check on its roots. He sleeps, and he rises, and he sleeps again. And the ground does the working without needing his supervision. This," he taught, "is a picture of your own mind. Your consciousness is the field. Your assumption is the seed, and the moment you plant a feeling and then spend the day tearing at it with worry, with checking, with asking why it has not shown itself yet, you become the man who digs up his own harvest before it can be born. So many of you have prayed a true prayer in a quiet moment and then murdered it by lunchtime with doubt, and you are not the only one. Nearly everyone has done this at least once. The verse is not a farming lesson. It is a description of your own inner life. It is not something outside you growing crops in a field somewhere. It is your own assumption ripening in the dark, while your outer eyes are busy elsewhere. And today you are going to learn what it truly means to say the words "it's already working," and to mean them the way the sleeping man means his rest. Before we go any further, let's plant something true together right now. Say it with me. I am at peace this morning because it's already working. I am feeling the wish fulfilled as though it has already happened. Imagination creates my reality. Again, I am at peace this morning because it's already working. I am feeling the wish fulfilled as though it has already happened. Imagination creates my reality. If something in you just went quiet while you said that, type the two words "it's done" into the comments below, not as a wish thrown out into the dark, but as a small seal placed on what you have just assumed. Let this be the one place today where you speak as though the matter is already settled, because in the deepest sense, it already is. The first key is, "it's already working" is not a wish thrown toward tomorrow. It is a report sent back from the end, and there is a whole world of difference between the two. A wish says, "Please let this happen someday." A report says, "This has already happened, and I am simply the one informing you." When you rise in the morning and speak that sentence, you are not begging some outside power to begin something new. You are remembering that the field was already planted, that the state you assumed while you rested last night is even now doing its slow, unseen work beneath the surface, whether you feel like it or not, whether the mail brings good news or bad, whether the bank account looks the same as it did yesterday. None of that changes what is quietly happening under the ground, any more than a plain, uneventful morning changes what is happening beneath the soil in a farmer's field. Think for a moment of a man who plants a garden on a Saturday afternoon, and then Sunday morning he is out there before breakfast, on his knees, brushing back the dirt just to check whether anything has moved, and Monday he does it again, and by Wednesday he has so disturbed the little seed with his checking that it never has a fair chance to root at all. This is not a story about gardening. It is a story about the mind. It is you, checking your phone 11 times before noon to see if the answer has arrived. It is you, replaying the hard conversation for the 5th time to see if it has changed. It is you, asking your own heart over and over whether the thing is really coming, and each asking is a small hand pulling at a root that only wanted to be left alone in the dark. It is not your job to make the seed grow. That was never your job. Your only true work was the planting, which is the assumption, and the guarding of your own mouth so you do not stand in daylight and shout doubt down into the very ground you just blessed at dawn. So this morning, before you check a single message, before the day hands you its evidence, you say 5 quiet words, plainly, without performance. It's already working, and you let that be enough. You are not lying when you say it. You are remembering, because Neville Goddard taught that the feeling you fall asleep in becomes the fact you wake into. And if you fell asleep last night feeling the wish fulfilled even a little, then somewhere beneath this ordinary morning, the harvest has already begun without asking your permission. It is not the frantic hand digging in the soil that brings the corn. It is the quiet ground left alone to do what ground has always known how to do. I plant in peace. The increase is not mine to force. The second key is, the words "it's already working" must be spoken from the end and never toward it. And this is the difference between a prayer that works and a prayer that only exhausts you. When you speak toward the end, you are still standing outside the house, knocking, hoping someone lets you in, straining your ear for footsteps, rehearsing what you will say if the door opens, and what you will feel if it does not. When you speak from the end, you are already inside, sitting at the table, speaking the way a person speaks who has nothing left to prove. And Neville Goddard taught that this single shift, from reaching toward a thing to resting inside it, is the whole of the secret. Not a small part of it. The entire secret. Let me give you a picture of this from an ordinary week. Imagine a woman waiting on a letter that will tell her whether she has been accepted for a position she has quietly wanted for a long time. Every morning she wakes and says to herself, "I hope it comes today." And every evening when it has not come, she feels the small defeat of another day spent waiting. Notice what she is actually doing. She is renewing her outsideness every single morning. She is standing at the same locked door and knocking again with the exact same hand. Now imagine a second woman, wanting the very same position, who instead wakes and quietly assumes she already has it. She does not check the mailbox with a held breath. She moves through her day the way a person already employed there would move. She speaks of the place, if she speaks of it at all, the way you speak of a coat already hanging in your own closet, plainly, without urgency, without needing anyone to confirm it. This is not pretending, and it is not denial of what her eyes currently see. It is simply where she has chosen to stand in her own imagination, and Neville Goddard taught that imagination, not the mailbox, is the truer address. Notice this pull in your own life. Notice how differently you speak about a thing you are still trying to get, compared to how you speak about a thing you already comfortably possess. You do not walk around your own kitchen insisting to yourself that you own it. You do not stand at the stove reminding yourself, "This stove is mine." You simply live in it. You make coffee in it. You assume it so completely that the thought of ownership never even crosses your mind. That ease, that total unbothered assumption, is exactly what living in the end feels like, and it is available to you right now regarding the very thing you have been anxiously toward, instead of restfully within. So when you say it's already working in the morning, do not say it the way a nervous student recites a hopeful line moments before an exam, half hoping, half bracing. Say it the way you would mention the weather, as an obvious, settled fact requiring no defending and no audience. Pause for a moment right now and pick one real desire, something specific you have been asking for, and simply notice how you have been speaking about it in your own private mind this week. Have you been speaking like the tenant still waiting outside the door, checking the lock, listening for footsteps, or like the one already home, already settled, already unremarkable in your possession of it? This small noticing is the second key turning quietly in your hand, because the outer world, Neville Goddard taught, has no choice but to arrange itself around whichever one of those two people you have quietly and repeatedly decided to be. I speak from the end, and not toward it. The third key is, "It's already working" stays true across the entire ordinary day, not only in the sacred quiet of the morning, because you do not live in a single moment. You live in a state, and a state is something you move through hour by hour the way you move through rooms in a house. And this is precisely where most people lose the harvest they were given at dawn. They plant beautifully at 7 and then spend the rest of the day undoing it by 9. So let's walk through an ordinary day together and watch the mechanism at work in plain, unremarkable detail. At 7 in the morning you wake and you speak your 5 words, "It's already working," and for a moment you feel the peace of it settle into your chest, like warmth returning to a cold room. By 8:30 you are at your desk, and an email arrives that looks like it might be bad news, and something in your chest tightens. This is the test, not a failure. Simply a test. The ground does not stop growing the seed just because a cloud passed over the field. At 9 you catch yourself, and instead of arguing with the email in your mind all morning, replaying it, rehearsing your defense, feeding it your attention like fuel, you quietly return, even for 10 seconds, to the feeling you had at 7. You whisper it again. It's already working. By noon, a coworker mentions something that seems to contradict your desire. Some offhand comment that seems to say, "This will not happen for you." And again you notice the old pull to defend your position out loud, to explain, to convince. And again you choose instead to hold the inner conversation steady, saying nothing outward at all. Because the true conversation was never with the coworker, it was always with yourself. By 2 in the afternoon, you notice your own body has relaxed without your permission. Your shoulders have dropped an inch you did not consciously lower. This is what a held assumption does to a person from the inside. By 3, you realize you have gone nearly 2 hours without checking on the outcome at all, not because you forced yourself to stop checking, but because you were simply living, occupying the state, instead of standing outside it knocking. And by evening, whatever the actual events of the day were, the traffic, the tone of a phone call, the number on a page, you notice you are calmer than you would have been a year ago facing these very same events. This is not because the day was easy, it is because the field was already planted, and you were finally letting the ground do what ground does, without your hands tearing at it every hour. Consider also the version of this same day lived the old way, waking with hope, losing it by the first difficult email, spending the whole afternoon negotiating with worry, arriving home exhausted not from the day's actual demands, but from the war fought entirely inside one's own head. That exhaustion was never necessary. It was the cost of digging up a seed 12 times before lunch. Neville Goddard taught that you are not your moods, and you are not your circumstances. You are the one who moves between states the way you move between rooms. You can stand in the kitchen or stand in the garden, and the house does not stop being your house simply because you changed rooms. Once you understand this, an ordinary day stops being a threat to your assumption and becomes simply the scenery your assumption is quietly working behind. It is not the outer day that decides whether it's already working is true. It is the state you keep returning to inside the outer day. So this week, notice the exact moment your peace slips, name it gently, and return. That returning, repeated patiently, is the entire practice. The ground is already working while I live my ordinary day. The fourth key is, when the day brings you evidence that seems to argue against your assumption, you do not revise your assumption to match the evidence. You revise the evidence to match your assumption. Neville Goddard called this simply revision, and it is one of the gentlest, most practical tools he ever gave. Most people live backwards without ever noticing it. They let the day write the story first, and then spend the evening quietly believing whatever it wrote. A hard word from a supervisor becomes proof that you are behind. A bill in the mailbox becomes proof that lack is winning. A silence from someone you love becomes proof that you are forgotten. And none of it was ever proof of anything except this, that you let the outer scene stand unedited in your own mind, as though the day had a vote and your own consciousness did not. Neville Goddard taught that nothing is more foolish than treating an event as final simply because it has already happened, when the very meaning of that event is still, at every moment, being assigned by you. Consider an ordinary evening. You come home carrying a conversation that went badly. Your manager questioned your work in front of others, and you replay it all through dinner, at the sink, in the shower, each replay sinking the scene a little deeper, as though you were digging a small grave for your own peace with your own 2 hands. This is exactly where revision enters and does its quiet work. Instead of replaying the scene as it happened, you sit for a few minutes with your eyes closed, and you run it again the way you wish it had gone. You hear your manager speak with respect instead of doubt. You see yourself answer with quiet steadiness. You feel the warmth of being valued instead of the sting of being questioned. And you hold that better feeling until it settles the way the old, harder feeling used to settle. You are not lying to yourself when you do this. You are simply refusing to let an inferior scene have the final word over your own consciousness. Neville Goddard taught that imagination does not distinguish between an event lived in the flesh and an event lived vividly within. And this is precisely why revision works at all. The scene you correct at night becomes, in the deeper ledger your own mind keeps, every bit as real as the scene that first occurred, so the bruise does not have to stay open until morning. It is tended before you sleep, and the ground is already quiet. The fifth key is the deepest one, and it deserves to be unfolded slowly, in pieces, not rushed through the way you might rush through the others, because this is the key that explains why the other four even work at all. So first, consider this. Everyone you meet in the outer world is, in a very real sense, you pushed out. Neville Goddard taught that the people around you are not independent judges handing down their own private verdicts about you. They are mirrors, faithfully reflecting whatever you have quietly assumed about yourself in the unseen rooms of your own mind. The coworker who seems to doubt you is reflecting a doubt you have not yet released about yourself. The stranger who is unexpectedly warm toward you is reflecting a warmth you have finally begun, even shyly, to believe you deserve. Think of a woman who for years believed, without ever saying it aloud, that she was easy to overlook. At family gatherings she noticed, again and again, how conversations moved past her, how she was the one asked last, remembered second, thanked briefly if at all, and she took this as simple fact, evidence gathered honestly from a lifetime of observation. But Neville Goddard would have stopped her gently and asked, "Who do you suppose arranged the seating?" One winter, she began, quietly and without announcing it to anyone, to assume a different self, not louder, not demanding, simply someone worth turning toward. She said inwardly, "I am someone people delight to include," and she said nothing else about it to a single living soul. Within months, without her changing a single outward habit, without rehearsing a single new sentence to say to anyone, the very same relatives who had overlooked her for years began, unprompted, saving her a seat, asking her opinion first, calling just to hear her voice. Nothing outside her had been asked to change. Only the self she was secretly assuming had changed. And the outer world, having no will of its own in the matter, simply caught up to what she now was on the inside. This is what it means to say everyone is you pushed out. It means the true work of your life is never done on the mirror, it is done on the face. Second, consider the phrase I am. Neville Goddard taught that I am is not a boast, and it is not a title. It is the bare, quiet awareness of being that exists beneath every single thought you have ever had, before you were happy or sad, before you were doing well or struggling. Before you had a name or a story at all, you simply were, and you still are. That awareness alone, untouched by circumstance, is the most powerful possession you carry, because whatever word you attach to it in the privacy of your own thinking becomes the self you then wear out into the world like a coat. I am always the one things fall apart for. I am forgotten. I am behind. Each of these is a small vow, renewed without ceremony, sometimes a dozen times before breakfast, and each one plants precisely what it says into the same soil that later produces your actual day. So when you speak the words it's already working, you are not merely commenting on an outcome, you are quietly attaching something new and deliberate to your own I am. You are saying, underneath the sentence, I am the one for whom it is already working, and consciousness, being entirely lawful and utterly without favorites, has no choice whatsoever but to arrange your circumstances, your mirrors, your ordinary Tuesdays, around whichever I am you keep faithfully renewing. Third, consider the state Neville Goddard called akin to sleep, the drowsy, softened condition just before true sleep arrives, where the arguing, analyzing, defending mind finally loosens its grip on you. This state matters enormously, because it is the doorway through which an assumption stops being a hopeful idea you are merely entertaining, and becomes instead a settled conviction planted below the reach of doubt. Picture a man lying down at the end of an ordinary day, a day that gave him no particular reason for hope. And instead of replaying his worries the way he has every other night for months, he lets his body grow heavy and still, and in that stillness he does not merely think about the raise he has been quietly assuming. He feels a hand on his shoulder. He hears a familiar voice saying, "Congratulations, we are so glad for you." He feels the small, specific warmth of being genuinely pleased, not someday, but now, in this drowsy, undefended moment, and he lets that scene be the very last thing his mind touches before it lets go entirely. Neville Goddard taught that impressions given to the mind in this soft, sleep-drowsy state sink far deeper than any impression given to the wide-awake, arguing, wide-eyed mind ever could. The way a seed sinks easily into ground that has been softened by rain, rather than ground left hard and unturned. And it is this very same softened ground into which your 5 morning words fall the next day. So when you wake and say it's already working, you are not speaking into indifferent, untouched earth. You are speaking into soil you yourself prepared only hours earlier, while the house was dark and quiet and no one else was watching. This is why the evening practice and the morning declaration are never two separate disciplines but one single continuous motion. The evening plants the feeling, and the morning simply remembers, out loud, what was already lovingly placed there. I am the self I quietly assume in the dark, and the mirrors are only catching up. The 6th key is, let your 5 words be the smallest, gentlest habit you own. Not a performance, not a demand, simply a quiet return each morning to what you already know beneath the noise of the day. Think of it the way you think of tying your shoes before you leave the house. No one stands in the doorway rehearsing dramatic reasons why the laces must be tied. You simply bend down, you cross the laces, you pull them snug, and you walk out into your day without another thought about it. This is the shape a true assumption eventually takes. Not a performance staged for some invisible audience, but a small, unremarkable motion repeated until it becomes as natural as your own footsteps. It is not a ceremony you perform, it is a habit you keep. And the difference between the two is the difference between a person still trying to convince themselves and a person who has simply moved in. There was a woman, ordinary in every visible way, who began saying these 5 words each morning for a reason that had nothing to do with faith. She was simply tired. Tired of waking already anxious, and someone had told her that the first words spoken shape the day that follows. So she tried it, not because she believed it, but because she had nothing left to lose by trying. The first week she said it's already working, and felt like an actress reading lines she did not yet believe. Her own voice sounded strange to her in the quiet of her bedroom, but she kept saying it anyway. The second week something shifted. So slightly she almost missed it. She noticed she was reaching for her phone a little later. The third week, she caught herself saying the words without meaning to, half asleep, the way you hum a tune you did not choose to start humming. By the second month, the words had stopped being something she said, and had become something she simply was. No longer a sentence she reached for, but a room she woke up already standing in. Notice what happened there. She did not wait for proof before she kept saying it, and she did not need the proof to arrive before the words became true for her. This is the quiet order of things that so many get backwards, waiting for the outer world to hand them permission to feel peaceful. When Neville Goddard taught that the feeling must always come first, uninvited, unproven, offered freely, before a single outer thing has changed, it is not the harvest that makes the habit worth keeping. It is the habit, kept gently and without strain, that eventually becomes the harvest. So do not judge your 5 words by how convinced you feel on any single morning. Some mornings they will come out steady and full, other mornings they will come out thin, almost automatic. And both mornings count exactly the same, because the seed does not ask the hand that plants it to feel a certain way. It only asks to be planted. Let your voice be quiet. Let your tone be unremarkable. Let this be the last performance you ever give of trying to feel something. And the first plain fact you simply state, it's already working, said the way you would say your own name, without effort, without an audience, without needing anyone, including yourself, to applaud. I let this be as ordinary as my own breath. Here is the whole picture. The seed is your assumption. The field is your own consciousness. The ground doing its secret work while you sleep is the very thing you were told, all your life, that you had to force with your own hands. The first key told you to stop digging up what you have already planted. The second key told you to speak from the end rather than toward it. The third key told you that an ordinary day is not a threat to your assumption, but simply the room it works quietly behind. The fourth key told you that when the day argues, you revise the day and never the assumption. And the fifth key told you that every person you meet is a mirror of your own I am, and that the drowsy edge of sleep is the doorway where tomorrow's harvest is truly decided. And the sixth key simply asked you to let all of this become as ordinary as breathing, and if you look closely, you will see these were never 6 separate keys at all. They were 6 turns of the same single key, which is this. Feeling is the one true language of creation. And the moment you feel a thing as already so, the ground beneath you, whether you are watching it or not, has no choice but to bring it forth. And so nothing further is being sold to you here. And nothing further is being asked of you except the practice itself. Tomorrow morning, before the world has a chance to hand you its opinion of your life, speak your 5 words, plainly, quietly, the way a person speaks who is no longer arguing with the outcome. It's already working. And let that sentence be the whole of your religion for that one small moment. Say it with me one final time. I am at peace this morning, because it's already working. I am feeling the wish fulfilled, as though it has already happened. Imagination creates my reality. And so this morning, and every morning after it, you plant your 5 quiet words into ground that was never asleep to begin with. It's already working. And so, dear friend, are you.